Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video. This is going to be the first video in a series basically covering how to get into Avatar books. So I'm going to start here with this first video in the series, how to get into Avatar comics. So going over everything Avatar and Korra comics. The second one is probably going to be about the novels and also the Avatar Legends RPG. And then the third video will be probably stuff like the art books and other extra books that are out there. Before I begin here though, I do want to mention that I do have YouTube channel membership enabled on the channel. So if you would like to help support the channel, this is probably the best way to do so. You get a couple of perks for joining at either tier. You get emojis and there's a badge next to your name, and then if you come in at the higher tier you'll get access to some exclusive videos on the channel, usually one a month, about interesting kind of stuff I wouldn't usually put up on the channel publicly. But yeah, that is just a way to help support the channel and it really does help. But let's get into the video here. So starting off with just some notes here as we start this off. What am I going to be talking about here? What am I not going to be talking about here? I'm not really going to be focusing here on prices and where to buy the books, mainly because I could never do it in enough detail where it would be ideal for people from every single region. I just don't know enough about shops and in a way the releases of these comics in other international regions. So this is just the basics here at the start. Comics are available in physical format or digital format. Digital is pretty much always cheaper than physical, and within physical releases, the soft cover books are typically always cheaper than the hardcover books. You can get the books digitally from the obvious places like Apple Books, Kindle, Amazon, or Dark Horse Digital, the publisher themselves. For physical copies, Amazon I think is just going to be the most obvious catch-all place where most people should have access to. Beyond that, I would just recommend you try your local book or local comic book store to see if they have Avatar and Korra comics in stock. Otherwise, check out an online store that you know of that sells comics, and they should have Avatar comics. The next thing I'll go into is sort of new as a kind of format, kind of way to read the comics, and that is webtoons. This has popped up just rather recently, and it is the first official free way to read the comics, but it's going to be a very slow way to read them is the thing. So these are going to offer the comics in this sort of chapter, episode-based vertical scroll format. So the panels are going to be organized all reading downwards basically, which is kind of interesting. Otherwise, the story is exactly the same. These chapters will be free to read, but there is only one of these chapters coming every week. And they're starting right at the start, and there's enough Avatar comics to where it's going to take quite a while to get through into some of the newer comics. So you might be waiting quite a bit here, but if you want to read it officially and for free, webtoons is the way to do it. With that out of the way, let's jump into the actual comics themselves, and we have to start with the main big comics, and those are the Avatar and Korra comic trilogies. So let's start off here with Avatar, ATLA Comics, and that is The Promise. So this is number one. This is the first Avatar comic trilogy, The Promise. So this one, what it's about is Aang, Zuko, and Earth King Kwai disagree on what to do with the Fire Nation colonies in the Earth Kingdom in the aftermath of the 100-year war. What you see pictured on screen here, the first three images are the three individual parts. This is why they're called comic trilogies, because they were released as a part 1, part 2, and then a part 3, a couple of months apart. Then they eventually got collected into the first collected edition here is the library edition. This is the hardcover version of the book. And then the last image is the Omnibus edition of the book, which is a soft cover version 3-in-1. Effectively, the first three images, the first three books are in the Omnibus edition, but it's the same size format. I'll show you with myself on screen with my copies of the books right now what's going on with the editions. So let's take a look at the different editions of the comics. So I just showed you The Promise, and let's actually show off what those editions actually look like. So the way the comic first came out, it's a trilogy. So it comes out in part 1, part 2, part 3. So here's the Promise part 1, the Promise part 2, and the Promise part 3. And what these comics are, these are just small-ish 72-page comics where all it is the story content, and that's it. It's just a standard way to present the material as easy as possible. New release comics, when they come out, are in this format. Since we don't really do trilogies like part 1, part 2, part 3 anymore, we do one-shots. The one-shots still are in this style of format of book, the kind of graphic novel style format. These days, do you need to focus on trying to get these as part of your collection? In my mind, not unless you just really want to have all of the Avatar comics in their kind of original release format. Because if you do get some of the new release stuff, they'll be in this format. So if you want to get the older copies to kind of match up with that, I can understand that from a collection point of view. But if you just want a version of the comics in the best way possible, you probably are going for one of the collected editions of the comic. So what we have here, this is the Omnibus edition here. You'll note it's the same size as the individual parts. It's just thicker because it has part 1, part 2, and part 3 together in the same book. And it's pretty similar for the library edition here. It's obviously bigger, but it still is 3 comics worth of The Promise in one book. Both of these comics do have extras in them, which we'll get through in just a second. But just to highlight that, that is probably your main buying decision right there. Both feature the exact same story content, 216 pages of The Promise, more or less the same extras, we'll get to it. But the size difference is probably the big thing. You've got hardcover, more expensive book versus soft cover and smaller book and less expensive. Which are you looking for in your collection? Do you want the big deluxe books, or do you just want sort of the most effective way to get the comics? Because that's probably what the Omnibus edition is. That's your choice. So they do all have some art extras at the back here, as you can see. These are pretty consistent across all the books. Some of the Omnibus editions don't have like one of the grouping of pages of extras, but for the most part, it's pretty consistent. The only stuff that is in the library edition that is not in the Omnibus edition, so the only real exclusive for the hardcover edition, is the annotations that are on the pages, on some of the pages in the hardcover. So you can see here the text on the sides in the big margins. And there's some annotations from the creators just giving some commentary on what's happening on the pages. The unfortunate thing about these is that they are on every single page, even if there's no text on that page. So you'll note like here, blank everywhere, and it takes up a lot of page space. And there's only annotations on, depending on which book you're talking about, 50 to 80 pages out of like 216. So it's nowhere near a situation where like all of the pages are filled up. It's less than a quarter in some of these books, and that's not great considering there's these giant blank gaps. And I don't think, in my mind, the annotations add so much that it really justifies it. So if you are going to buy the library edition over the Omnibus edition, to me, it should be because it's the big hardcover version of the book, and you want a fancy version of the book, not because you want the exclusive annotations. Otherwise, I think all the significant stuff is here across both of these books, and there's no real like obvious difference kind of otherwise. So the Omnibus is probably my overall recommendation, but if you are more of a hardcore collector, get the library edition if you want that fancy book. Really quickly with the Korra comics, they're pretty similar. They also release part 1, part 2, part 3. That's the way that they do it as well. 72 pages, it's the same format. In terms of the collected editions for Korra, it's again pretty similar. You get your Omnibus edition 3-in-1 and your 3-in-1 library edition version of Turf Wars. Hardcover books. They both have some extras at the back. The only difference between Avatar and Korra library editions is just that Korra books do not have annotations or space for annotations. They just don't include that at all, which I think is better. So with Korra here, your literal decision is exact same content inside. It's size, format, price. That's all you're kind of thinking about there. As a final little detail here, probably should do this comparison as well. The Korra Library Edition size versus the Avatar Library Edition size. You can see that keeping the spines up against each other here, the Avatar Library Edition is a decent bit wider than the Korra one because of that annotation space extra. It makes the book overall a little bit kind of wider. So it does mean like on your shelf, you're going to have a little bit of an offset here in terms of the depth of the book basically, but you can bring the Korra books forward if you want to match it up that way. It's entirely up to how you display your collection, but that across the main trilogy of comics is how the formats break down. So with that out of the way, let's go into the other Avatar comics. So the second comic trilogy is The Search. This one I think a lot of people are familiar with because it's such a significant story. What happened to Zuko's mom, Ursa? Ursa's past is revealed as the search to find her begins. The third Avatar comic trilogy is The Rift. A factory built on sacred air nomad land brings Aang and Toph into conflict. Things get more complicated as it is revealed that Toph's father owns the factory. The fourth comic trilogy for Avatar is Smoke and Shadow. Zuko begins to encounter resistance to his rule, led by Mei's father Ukano. At the same time, children are being kidnapped by mysterious cloaked figures. And you can see in the Omnibus edition here, a bit of a spoiler for kind of who's involved in this story. But the fifth Avatar comic trilogy is North and South. Katara and Sokka return to the Southern Water Tribe for the first time since the start of their journey. How will they deal with how much their home has changed? And this was the last Avatar comic trilogy with this specific creative team of Team Gurihuru and on art and Jean Yang as the writer. With the sixth and final Avatar comic trilogy, we switched over to a different creative team, Faith Erin Hicks as the writer and Peter Wortman on art. And this has been the team that we've had since this point. So in balance, Team Avatar returns to Toph's father's factory to find that the area has developed into a large town. But issues between benders and non-benders are now growing. So this is a clear setup, really obvious setup for Republic City beginning to happen here in the comics. So now you know about the 6 Avatar comic trilogies, but just an extra note about specifically the omnibus editions of these books. One unique aspect of them that's not present on like the Korra omnibus editions is that when you stack the omnibus editions up side by side on a shelf, you make an image across the spines. This is specifically the North and South Library Edition cover without the background, but it's the image of the characters across the spines. And it includes all 6 of these. You can see there's even a tiny little bit on imbalance, which was a little bit of a surprise when it happened. But this is another reason you might want to grab the Omnibus edition specifically, because it looks nice on a shelf. Now, a little bit more of a niche thing about collecting is that you should be a little bit aware of this when it comes to grabbing copies of specifically the Rift Omnibus. Because I think a lot of people have fallen into this trap. It's Dark Horse's fault. The first print run of this comic, they didn't do it properly. So here is 2 copies of the Rift Omnibus, and you can immediately see the difference between the 2 of them. This one here is a first edition copy. The big thick one is first edition copy of the Rift. This is the corrected one in the second edition onwards, which makes the spine image work. But most people, I think, initially got this one, because if you like pre-ordered it, you got the thick one. And you can see here that it does include more of the image than it's meant to. Like you can see Aang's full elbow is in the Rift image. That's not meant to be correct. The issue is specifically that the Rift was printed with too thick of a spine. So what you need to be careful of with the Rift is make sure you don't get a copy that's kind of thick and chunky. Try and get one that looks more like the other omnibus editions. The only advice I can give you is just that it, from what I know, it affects the first edition printing of the book, but not the other print editions of the book. So I'm not sure how you can guarantee this for yourself, but if you do have a shop you can go to in person, at least you can look and check that basically you get a book that looks more like this one and not like this kind of thick version overall here. Because you can see if I put the bad version of the Rift in with the other ones, you can sort of see that it's off. You get like a double elbow ang there, and you can see it clearly looks different than the rest because it's like so much thicker. So just be aware of that, specifically with buying the Rift Omnibus edition. We'll switch over to the main Korra Comic Trilogies here. There's only 2 of them, and the first one is Turf Wars. So Korra and Asami return from their spirit world vacation to find conflict in Republic City, the presidential election, triads battling for turf, and upset spirits. How will Korra deal with all of this happening? The second and final Korra comic trilogy is Runes of the Empire. As Earth Kingdom elections begin, the remnants of the Earth Empire rise up to try and gain power. Korra turns to Kuvira for help in stopping the return of the Earth Empire. And yes, since then we have not got a mainline big Avatar or Korra comic story because we've seen a bit of a switch up in the approach to doing comics from this point on. And so that's what I'm going to explain here. So yes, after Imbalance and Runes of the Empire, Avatar and Korra comics have switched from comic trilogies to one-shot comics. These one-shots have a more sandbox style approach, with stories sometimes being post-series and sometimes set during the series. The trilogies were all post-series of Avatar and post-series for Korra, but these one-shots are going back and forth depending on who the character is, where they want to set it. Some of them are during the show, some of them are in the kind of comic timeline in between the comics, and that's what they mean by sandbox. It's like playing in the universe somewhere is the kind of idea here. So it's a little bit more random. It does mean we get less super important focused stories, but we get kind of a more of a variety in a way. So that means the next stuff that we have to cover here is, okay, what are these one-shot comics? Let's cover these. So on the Avatar side of things, we have ATLA One-Shot Trilogy number 1. Now I say trilogy here, not to say that these comics are inherently linked. This is more of from a production standpoint. It seems like the creative team sort of sign on to do 3 comics, and then they plan the next kind of group of 3 comics, but they're not inherently interlinked. The first trilogy consists of Katara and the Pirate Silver, a Katara one-shot comic. The second one is Toph Beifong's Metal Bending Academy, which is, of course, Toph focused. And then Suki Alone is our Suki focused comic. So you can see here there's a thematic link across all of these comics, in that it's the female members of Team Avatar, and that's internally what they were going for here. But the Katara comic here is set during book 2. The Toph comic is set in or around the comic timeline, so it's post-series. And then the Suki comic is also set during the series, but covers a little bit more ground because it also includes quite a bit of Suki backstory, so it's even further kind of into the past. So a bit of variety there, and it shows you kind of a sense for what they're doing. So all of these comics get individually released as like a part, basically 72-page comic, like The Promise Part 1. They have, instead of being collected into a hardcover, instead just been collected into a box set. So it's the exact same books, just put into a box with a new cover on it, and there's also a poster included. Very different way to collect it here. I'm not sure how well received necessarily it was. I think people like it when the books get collected like this, but fans of the hardcovers, of course, not super happy that they've been skipped over here, and there's also no omnibus related to these, at least so far. Next, we move on to the second kind of trilogy of one-shots for Avatar, which is still in progress. So we have Azula in the Spirit Temple. The next Avatar comic that's coming out is The Bounty Hunter and the Tea Brewer. And then there should be another one, but this has not been announced yet, because, of course, we still don't have the middle one of this trilogy. So the Azula comic is the furthest into the timeline details we have on Azula, so it's kind of important in that regard. The June and Iroh focused comic, The Bounty Hunter and the Tea Brewer, also will be set post-series and will delve into the backstories of Iroh and also June. That's coming out August 6th / August 7th, depending on bookstore or comic book store. And once again, because it's in progress, there's no collection announced, but I'm assuming they'll do a box set like they did for the first one. But that's just where we're at. A little bit of uncertainty with regards to the exact idea for the future of the comics. But switching over to Korra. Korra is also doing one-shot comics at this point. So we know specifically here, they're calling this a trilogy of Korra comics, and they are one-shots. So the first one, of course, is Mystery of Penkan Island. This is going to be, as you can see from the cover, a Mako-focused comic, but it looks like Bolin's going to be here with some focus on Mako and Bolin's family and their backstory. So very exciting to finally come back to Korra comics with a Mako-focused book. This book does not yet have an official release date. It seems to have suffered some production delays behind the scenes with regards to art being done on time. And so we don't have it solicited yet. We don't have a proper description for the book or an official date. But we are expecting that to pretty much happen any month now. So there's a chance it hits sometime this year, 2024, but there is a chance it gets pushed into 2025. We just don't know what the situation is. And then, of course, the other two books by the same creative team, because the first one isn't done, of course, the next two also haven't been done. But the expectations are, based on other one-shots for Avatar, is that these will be books focused on different Korra characters. So there might be, say, an Asami one-shot comic. We might get a Jinora one-shot comic, or who knows what character they'll bring to the forefront to do for the other two books. But you know, it's interesting. It's exciting, especially on the Korra side of things, just because we don't have that many Korra comics full stop. So any new content there is good. This means we have to switch over to short stories, because with the trilogies and one-shots out of the way, we have to go to the smaller scale stories now. So on the Avatar side of things, we have two sort of collections of short stories. First up is The Lost Adventures, the first comic that Dark Horse released. This collects 26 canon short stories that are set in between episodes and seasons of the show, as well as 2 non-canon stories. It is very clear that they're non-canon. They are put in a specific section called like bonus stories at the back of the book. And based on what happens in each of these stories, it is blatantly clear that they're non-canon. Team Avatar Tales, the other collection, is newer, and it collects 8 canon stories that are set in between episodes of the show, or some of them are set after the show in sort of the comic timeline type stuff. And this book also includes 3 of the Free Comic Book Day stories, which I'll explain in just a moment. But for fans of hardcovers, the short stories have been collected into a hardcover library edition. So this book is literally just called The Lost Adventures and Team Avatar Tales Library Edition. And as you would expect, it has everything in those 2 books, plus some concept art extras and a new cover. So that's good to know. And then just the final details on what exactly those Free Comic Book Day short stories are. For ATLA, there are 5 of them that were released as part of various years' Free Comic Book Day selection of comics. So we have Rebound, Shells, Sisters, Matcha Makers, and Lost and Found. The first 3 of these, Rebound, Shells, and Sisters, are collected in Team Avatar Tales, like I said earlier on. That means that Matcha Makers and Lost and Found, from some of the more recent Free Comic Book Days, are not collected in any book that you can just buy in a store. The only way to read these books like officially is if you get a hold of that year's Free Comic Book Day book from like eBay or something like that, or Dark Horse Digital has the free Comic Book Day books for free if you sign up there. So these would be expected to be collected at some point down the line when Dark Horse decides to do like another short story collection. We don't know when that's going to be, but we assume it will happen eventually just because they do have some books to reprint here. On the Korra side of things, in short stories, we have Patterns in Time. This collects 8 canon short stories, including 3 of the 4 Korra free Comic Book Days stories. And currently there is no hardcover book featuring Korra short stories. So there's no hardcover version of Patterns in Time or anything like that. There's not enough Korra short stories yet, I guess, to justify doing a big hardcover yet. But maybe in time it will happen. So here are the details on the Korra free Comic Book Day short stories. So we have Friends for Life, Lost Pets, Clearing the Air, and Beach Wars. The first 3, Friends for Life, Lost Pets, and Clearing the Air, are collected in Patterns in Time, meaning that on the Korra side of things, only Beach Wars is exclusive to its free Comic Book Day issue. But again, you can get the comic somewhere on like eBay or sign up to Dark Horse Digital and read it digitally that way. The final thing with comics to mention, it just on its own, bit of a random release, is this Chibi Comic, Aang's Unfreezing Day. It's an odd solo comic release that happened not too long ago. Aimed at younger readers, it uses the Chibi art style to tell what seems to be a canon story. It was said to be initially Volume 1, but there's no sign of a Volume 2 happening. And because of how delayed this book's release was, it feels like for sure we would have heard about a Volume 2. So it seems like this just didn't fully pan out. They got the full first book done, they put it out, but they're not doing any more. You can question if it is canon or not, just because it is that kind of chibi focus, but at least to me, because it doesn't lean into the absolute crazy hijinks of typical chibi content like the shorts, and it is a little bit more subdued, I think it is just that the art style is chibi and you can fit the story in roughly. The main thing that you have going on here is that I would say that the story is so unimportant, it kind of doesn't really matter if the comic is or isn't canon. So it's like a little bit of fun, but like it's not an important comic really at all. Final thing is just to again recap where are we at with regards to like upcoming books. I already covered pretty much everything, but just to highlight it again, on the Avatar side of things, the next upcoming comic is The Bounty Hunter and the Tea Brewer, the June and Iroh comic, and that is coming out August 6th/7th. On the Korra side of things, Mystery of Penkan Island is the next Korra comic, expected at some point in 2024, but it could be early 2025, depending on when it finally gets a date for. And then beyond that, it's just one-shots are expected to continue. We know we're getting at least 2 more Korra one-shots, and we would be expecting at least 1 more ATLA one-shot. And then after that, our assumption probably has to be they'll just do another trilogy of one-shots for Avatar and Korra, unless the start of Avatar Studios coming up, towards the end of 2025, getting into 2026, unless that happening suddenly opens up the comics to doing more, and maybe they announce some other lines of comics and we can expand out, it's hard to predict the future of the comics because we're kind of stuck in a little bit of a rut right now where the amount of releases is pretty low compared to what it used to be, and the significance of the stories is maybe not as big as it used to be either, but maybe we can get back to that point is sort of the idea. So I would definitely say that now I think is a pretty good time to get into the comics, because you are not going to be bombarded with new releases that you're going to struggle to keep up with. There's going to be 1, maybe 2 books out this year, and probably something very similar for next year. So now is the opportunity, with some big gaps between content, to come in, build up your collection, and get in line with where the rest of us are in terms of the new releases and catch up. But that is everything about Avatar and Korra comics. For anyone asking, wait, are there no comics set in any other eras outside of Aang and Korra's era? Seems like the answer is no. I'm not sure specifically why, if it's locked in that like the license only allows them to do this or that. I would love to see them do something like a Kyoshi comic, a Roku comic, Yang Chen comic, but it doesn't necessarily seem to be fully on the cards right now. But we'll see what happens. Avatar Studios offers the opportunity for almost anything to happen, so we'll see what happens with the comics. But yes, for now that has been the first video in this series, and we'll be back next time going over the Avatar novels as well as the Legends RPG books and material. But yes, that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.